Alrighty, so hey guys, my name is Christina. I am a computer science graduate from Bellarmine University. I am a data analytics and artificial intelligence mentor here with CodeU, and I am here to present to you guys about security vulnerabilities. So I decided to do vulnerabilities just because when I was started my job at Humana, basically we had a lot of stuff about vulnerabilities, and I didn't really know much about them. So they're like, hey, like we have all these vulnerabilities we need resolved. We need you to work on resolving these, and I'm like, I have no idea what any of this stuff means. So I have, kind of seen it in passing. Like I know what a vulnerability is, but beyond that, I'm just like, I used to have no idea before I started this. So even if it's not like super in depth, I feel like any exposure to this is really great. So you have that background information because it is absolutely super important for any application that you do. So most people here have probably heard of a vulnerability. So essentially, they can be used to exploit applications. And this can be done in so many different ways. So usually people will use this to access information. So if you have a site that kind of stores user data, I know, for example, I believe AT&T had a data breach either last year or the year before that, and leaked personal information of a ton of people. So they can use that information, and then a lot of people actually turn that around and sell it um, on like the black market and other things like that, and they can use that to gain some money. They can change information. So when they change information, essentially, they can either change what the request is returning, or they can reroute the request to a different location. There are instances where they can actually prevent the entire program from executing. So either you can completely crash the website, depending on what you have going on, or you had something where you essentially hold up the threads so that no one else can access anything while you have that. And then you can just take an entire website down. I know a lot of people have probably heard of a lot of hospitals in the past couple of years who ended up getting ransomware actually, where they have to pay a sum of money in order to get their systems back. And that's actually a really high target, is because those systems are essential and they need them up and running ASAP because of, like, hey, lives are at stake, right? Does anyone have any questions about that? Um, the AT&T hack, I'm not sure specifically when it was. I just remember that we got an email about it sometime this year or last year. Um, and I only know about it because my boyfriend was a customer at that time. So they're like, hey, your information has been breached. And we're like, okay, cool. Um, so yeah. So when someone uses a vulnerability for any purpose, for example, I work at Humana. And if you have a vulnerability that brings your website down or no one can access the website, you can lose millions of dollars on that. And that is pretty huge. I know a lot of corporations, if they don't have access to their website, then people can't offer their services. Um, if you have a reputation, for example, cloud services would be a huge example of services that you expect to be up 24/7 unless it's scheduled maintenance. So if you get in an attack and your website's brought down, then all of your clients end up losing the functionality on their websites, which really damages your reputation. You'll probably have a lot of clients that end up moving. You'll probably lose a lot of money in that scenario as well. And then you have legal consequences as well. So depending on how the vulnerability was realized, how it came across in your system, and what you guys did to prevent it in the first place, you can actually get some lawsuits based on that information that was leaked to other people. So there's a lot that can happen just with vulnerabilities, and it's super important to make sure to manage those in the application end. So we kind of talked about this before, but people who use these exploits, there are some who do it just because they enjoy creating chaos. I completely understand that as someone who is a chaos bringer myself, but I would not create chaos for malicious intent, and I do not encourage anyone here to do the same. So please do not take this presentation and be like, I want to be a chaos bringer and then bring open class down again. That's not why it's down, by the way, guys. It's just down because they're doing maintenance. But yeah. So there are some people who will do it for like political activism. You have your ransomware for financial gain. All of these are typically going to be black hat testing. So essentially, black hat testing, you just kind of black being kind of like a void. You don't know what's going on around you. You don't really know how something's particularly working, but it's upon executing that code in working with a running product that you figure out the exploits and then be able to bring them from there. So anyone who kind of manipulates an application or tries to bring malicious intent in there is typically referred to as a threat actor. It's just kind of a fancy name for it. So there are different types of exploits, and there's different subcategories of these too. So you have your SQL injection. SQL injection, you have a website that takes a query, and what you can do is have specific commands. So typically how this would work, for example, you have a login that uses SQL to query a database of users. And what someone can do is, instead of putting in a valid username and password, they can put in SQL queries that return a true value instead, and then that will lead them to sign on instead of them having to have a valid username and password. You have cross-site scripting, or XSS, where essentially you have your requests that are getting sent from one service to another. And someone can take those requests, change part of that request that goes to something else, and then it can either return broken data or otherwise unauthorized data in order to get information. And then very similarly, you can use broken authentication or the same thing in XML as well. So vulnerabilities being detected is something that I wasn't really sure about. So I'm like, who has time to sit there and like, how are these found, and like, what is the entire process, right? Because I'm like, these exist, but how do people find these things out? So there's actually a few different ways that these are detected in applications. So you have your white box testing. Essentially, you have a view of the code and you analyze the code for any known patterns or issues. And then if you have a match for that, then that's flagged as a potential vulnerability. So this is typically known as white box testing, is when you can see the actual functionality in the code that is running everything in the background. Typically, this would be used for static application security testing or a SAST report. So those will come back in like, it depends on your application, but I know when I run mine, it's typically about 15, 20 pages long, because it will go through each type and tell you this was not found, this was not found, this was not found, or break down what was found and how it was found. Similarly, you have your black box testing, like we discussed earlier, is you don't have access or you don't know how the underlying functionality works. So if you're running an application, you don't have access to that source code to see how that application works. You just know, hey, I'm a user and this is working. So for this, what you use is DAST, or Dynamic Application Security Testing. So instead of looking at the source code and just matching patterns, it actually emulates an attacker trying to access your code. And if it has any successes or failures, those will pop up on the report. And I think that's really cool because, you have different abilities of different tests, and just something that's automated to do that. It's really, really useful. And then the third one, kind of the one that I've seen used the most is SCA, which is the software composition analysis. So each of these vulnerabilities, there's actually a list of them I'll show later, but it goes through a software composition analysis. So those lists of vulnerabilities that are detected and already published, it goes through those dependencies, and if that package has any vulnerabilities associated with it, it will go ahead and return that package as a potential threat and then get it removed. So I know we had something where it was like, hey, this module is used in it was like automated cars and then communicating with each other. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's applicable to our website. So we're not really going to use that information, but that vulnerability still exists. So it's considered a possible risk. And then there are a lot of scanners that can do this for your application. I'll kind of give an example of a couple that you can use, because these are really cool and really helpful in trying to resolve these. Do we have any questions so far? Okay. So I'm actually going to pull up my website, and we're going to look at my website. So I did this website as a capstone for my senior year. This was actually something that I did. My goal was to just kind of do something that I have never seen before, and I was like, oh, website, React, let's do it. So essentially what I did is it's called free search. It's really cheesy. Hold on. But I really like it. Essentially what I did was just I made a word search generator. And it's really cool to me because I like word search puzzles. And then the plan is, to use natural language processing in order to kind of generate words associated with a word search, etc. So we'll get there. It's very amateur. Don't come at me, guys. This was the first website I had ever done, okay? And I didn't even have a class or anything on this. So it was a roller coaster, I will tell you that. Um, so, this is my website. We have our menu here. It's not really scaling very nicely to a large screen. But you have your descriptions, difficulty, easy, intermediate, hard, expert. You can view the different topics that are available. So it'll query my database and get all of the associated words with the topic. There's the puzzle generator, which I'll go back home really quickly. So the easy puzzle, there are 10 words between 3 and 5 letters. The intermediate, there are 20 words between 3 and 10 letters. Hard is 30 words between 3 and 15 letters, and then expert is 40 words between 3 and 15 letters. So you have like the ability to choose what difficulty you want with each topic. Essentially how this works is you go to the generator, you choose one of the topics, and then you choose which difficulty you want. If you have a topic that doesn't meet the requirements for one or more difficulties, you just won't be able to choose them from the list. So I will, for example, go to flight and choose easy and then generate the puzzle. And then it'll show up down here. I haven't added print functionality to that quite yet. But you have your words that show up in here. I have tested it. I promise that they're all in here. When I presented this, I did have a glitch in it to where it would overwrite like the last letter of some of these words. And like, well, that's inconvenient. But you have kite right here, K-I-T-E. And then we have orbit and pilot. This is really cool. I was really proud of this, guys. And then we have the answer key over here as well. So if I wanted, for example, to choose and break it, because that's what we do here is we break applications. I'll have to go back on that. So if I wanted to, for example, do career and then choose an intermediate puzzle, and then it would generate a larger puzzle because it kind of, the grid is designated and built off of the maximum length. So I think it was like 1.5 times the size of the maximum word going on either end to create a large enough grid on this. So this is my application. It's not much, but when I was doing this, I didn't have much insight on what vulnerabilities were. So I'm going to kind of go through this with you guys really quickly. I'm going to go here, delete this folder. So essentially, I'm downloading these packages. So what I'm using here, this is a JavaScript application. So it uses Node.js. That's where I get my packages from. And Node.js is pretty cool because it actually has a built-in scanner for you. So it'll go through and scan, and then it'll let you know what vulnerabilities you have in your application. Alrighty, so now that this is open, I'm going to go ahead and reopen it in my command line. Am I good? Are you loading? Nope. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and install this. And it'll go through and install my package lock. And this will take just a second, guys. So while these download, we're going to end up getting a report at the end of it. And that'll essentially tell us how many vulnerabilities we have. Oh, we have the expert in here now. David's here. Hey, David, we're just waiting on NPM to run. So anytime you install an NPM package, you're also going to get the same report. And there's a couple of built-in ways that NPM has to fix these. There's something very similar in most applications. So there are a few extensions available to take a look at this as well. One really popular is Sync Security. I don't even know if I pronounced that right. I always look at it and I'm like snake instead, but that doesn't always make sense. So I'm going to call it sync. All right, so this is done running. We had 1873 packages added. We ended up having 31 vulnerabilities with each of these packages. So this application was built and I was like, I see that, but I have no idea what to do about it. Typically, what I'll do is it'll have you run this command npm audit fix. And this command will enable, like, it'll kind of automatically resolve some of the recommended packages. But this will typically be like version upgrades. So you still may have some fixes that, need a manual upgrade, or you'll have to make some code changes to fix some of these. So with each of these, it kind of keeps a log of the specifics of each vulnerability. There is a command that will take a look at this. So I'm just going to type in npm audit. And then it'll pop up with these vulnerabilities up here. So it'll go through each vulnerability for you. And then you'll have the package name and the package numbers that are vulnerable. And then you have the risk severity. And then you have these links to these GHSAs. So essentially, when you click on these, it takes you to a GitHub link. There should be one critical on here. There we go. This is from Mongoose. I'll go ahead and open this up. So this will take you to the GitHub advisory database. And this will tell you a lot more information about what the vulnerability is and the nature of the vulnerability. So each vulnerability is typically assigned a CVE, or common vulnerability and exposures. The number starts with the year that it was discovered, and then you have your vulnerability number. I've noticed that typically they're grouped based on the packages that they kind of represent. So like Spring will be one group. You'll have your NPM operating systems as another group. So these CVEs are actually created by an organization. It's a nonprofit called MITRE. And MITRE is kind of sponsored by the Homeland Security, and then the CISA, or Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And then they actually just migrated their website to cve.org. And this will kind of tell you the nature of the CVE program. You have the CVE records, and then how they kind of create these. And there's a lot of interesting stuff on here that I actually didn't know it was on here. But MITRE is actually the people who create and maintain the list of CVEs. These are created, CNAs are authorized people to create these CVEs as a CVE numbering authority. So it's kind of like an open source nonprofit. it's really, really cool. So if you guys have any opportunities and you want to take a look at this, this is a good place. So I'm going to stick that there. This critical vulnerability in my application is 2024 53900. This was published December 2nd, 2024, and the package is Mongoose through NPM. So this will tell me the affected versions, which versions that the patch applies in. So typically, it looks like I am potentially using version, I don't know off the top of my head, but it looks like I'm using an 8 version here. So I would want to upgrade to 8.8.3 on mine. I typically, unless there's not a better option or I have to migrate something else, I try to stay within the same major version if I can. So you have all of these different links that kind of mention this vulnerability or, mentions a hot fix or more information on this. So this will take us to nist.gov. And while that's loading, over here we also have the severity of the issue. So the severity is usually out of 10, and it's usually based on these metrics. So the attack vector, basically this is a network attack. The attack complexity is low, meaning that it's a relatively easy attack for someone to initiate. There are no requirements that need to be met. There are no privileges that need to be required and no user interaction. So there's a link here that you can use to learn more about that. And this weakness actually correlates to the general subgroup of what the CVE stands for. So this one is for SQL injection. And it says it constructs all or part of a SQL command from an upstream component, but it does not neutralize or incorrectly neutralizes the elements that could modify the SQL command. And then it'll take you to MITRE to learn more about that. So the NIST website, and if you haven't heard of a NIST, it's a huge organization led by the government. They also, I use this with work a lot. They'll have the CVE number, and then they'll have the references to advisory solutions, tools. It's essentially the same thing, but you have different metrics that are provided on here. One thing that I typically prefer to use is actually some of the websites that these get created off of. So this is a NPM Mongoose vulnerability. So typically I'll go through and I'll find the site. So this is NPM and then it's their package. So I'll go here. And then typically on these, they'll have a site on here specifically for active vulnerabilities. Let's see here. Uh, 8.8.3. It is not on here anymore, probably because it is no longer recommended. There we go. And then I'm going to scroll down, see if I can find this. Typically, they have warnings on anything that has vulnerabilities that will get generated. And through these, they'll kind of they will suggest the most upgraded version in order for you to use this. A lot of companies actually use package managers. And those really make it a lot easier on you as well because these package managers enable you to take a look at what the next non-vulnerable package is, and that kind of cuts a lot of the work out for you. One of my favorites is actually with Maven. Maven has their website, which you can use to view packages available in like Java, in other languages. And it will also show the breakdown of the package dependencies in if they have vulnerabilities as well. So that's pretty nice. On the CVE website, you have access to learn more about CVEs, the terminology relating them, and then you can also enter keywords. So you have your ID, you have your type of vulnerability. If I come through here, and then I take a look at this CVE. The 53900, so it'll be this one. And then this is where MITRE keeps up with their CVE information. So basically, this one uses specifically the $sign and where, and then you have your product status, and then you have a bunch of acronyms down here as well for the record guide. So typically when resolving CVEs, I will try to upgrade to a non-vulnerable package. And this is kind of the default for a lot of people unless there's no other option, because if there are vulnerabilities, there's always going to be a risk within an associated package that is not typically wanted. So this is a really important part of my everyday work in what I typically do. We have a report that we have to go through every day. So a lot of these are the result of open source software. So a security advisor will find this vulnerability, or it will be found using one of their SAST or DAST scans. And then it'll get uploaded to this website, and then it's thrown out to other organizations from there. So it's really cool. I didn't know that all of this existed, but it is really, really useful. And now I know more about this. So for initial fix, what I can do is just do the NPM audit fix in here. And then it'll go ahead and throw these in there. And then we can see. I have had luck sometimes where if I use this command, it'll actually create more vulnerabilities, which is really fun. So we're going to go ahead and try to see if this lowers the number. It's not always perfect. Sometimes you do have to analyze these. This actually did go down. So that's actually really nice. It's just something that we'll have to go through and kind of take another look at what we have here. So post CSS, React scripts, and this will tell you which ones are breaking changes as well. So the fix available is npm audit fix and force. And you have to use force because it is a breaking change in your application. Likely won't work after that. So we added 21 packages, removed 4, and then changed 79 packages. Typically, those would be version upgrades. So any of these, I can do the fix force, but what I would really want to do is take a look at the version that I'm currently using versus the version that it recommends installing, and seeing what the upgrade differences are, what I'm using in my application, and kind of assessing how that will be impacted. So, that's typically what I do. Do we have any questions about that before I kind of go into some other resources? Yeah, Max?
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that you're showing like practically like how you use it in your job. Is it
Don't get
is
me
the
wrong,
built-in
this
like
is not my job,
yeah.
and I don't
Oh, I know,
want
but
to get back to someone in Humana saying, hey, she's showing off Humana's website. That's not what I'm doing.
um but so in your job, is this the only kind of SAST tool that you use when you're analyzing your application, or is there like another team that does more?
So that's actually a good question. So, Humana it's like so divided, so we have different teams for a lot of different things. We do have a team that kind of works on vulnerabilities, but what we do is we actually have a SAST and a DAST scanner built into our production pipelines.
Gotcha.
So if it fails either of those tests, and usually it'll give us a letter grade A through F on those, and then we can view the PDF report of it, and then it'll either pass or fail. I know if we have some vulnerable applications through the SEA scan, it won't even let us run the pipeline.
Yeah, okay. So like it but is this something like if you're building something in Node, do you build in Node at work?
Um, yes, I typically build more in Java than I do in Node at work.
Okay, gotcha. I was just
Um,
wondering if that's like this is something that you regularly do as part of your workflow, like before you would try to push something into the pipeline.
yeah, and that's definitely something we're trying to look at more. So because we have that scanning software, typically I'll deploy it to a local environment and scan it before I deploy on anything available anywhere else.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's a good way to do it. But we do actually have we use JFrog at work, and it's
You said
basically,
JFrog?
yeah, it's a kind of a Artifactory package manager system, and I can use JFrog command line in order to scan for those vulnerabilities and packages. So JFrog will
Okay.
actually keep track of which packages have vulnerabilities. Um, Trying to get access to anything at Humana is a huge pain.
Yeah.
So I haven't quite figured out how to get that access yet.
Yeah.
But typically what I'll do is run it locally, and if there's no environment, no vulnerabilities locally, then I'll release to different environments one by one. And
Okay.
I'll always check it after I deploy.
Yeah. Do you, I guess so that's checking for like dependencies, so like packages that you've imported or whatever. But do you all have anything, I guess, have you ever like had something come back with a bad letter grade for something that you wrote?
Um, you know, Using the letter grades is not typically something that I would do. So I typically focus on the packages. I know the letter grades, they were an issue when I came on, before I knew what any of this was.
Yeah.
So for these vulnerabilities, I was just like, hey, we have these vulnerabilities, fix these. I was like, I have no idea what any of these mean. So the SAS and
Yeah.
DAS scans, those are a little out of my league while I was still learning this. But there are definitely code changes that we had to make due to failing those scans.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what they did, and that's really cool. It took me a while to figure out, like, oh, that's what that does. But as long as we have like an A, we're good to deploy on those.
Okay.
So we kind of have multiple checking processes throughout that. So I know for my Java project, we actually use Maven. In Maven, we'll use Gradle with that, and we get our packages through Maven, and Gradle will actually warn us as part of the IDE for that scans. I know Sync also does something similar. I don't have an account on Sync though, so I'm not going to kind of create an account while we have this, but you know, it kind of goes through and it'll show you through inline issue highlighting. You have your open source security, you have your code security, and then it also shows you how to set up and install this. So it's actually really cool. Let me go ahead and open this. Sync was actually recommended to me by someone here. But this is kind of what it looks like. So it'll kind of show the issues, which files you're having issues. You can rescan it. So you have your open source, your code. Code quality is a huge thing because that's also detected in SAST and DAST scans. So this is kind of something that you can trigger on your local environment before you do any employment, like deployment whatsoever.
Okay.
And there's also several other ones too. Sync is kind of a huge one that I know of, but there are others out there. I know Gradle is it kind of does it automatically for Java. So I mean, all these resources and like I look back on it and I'm just kind of like, this is so important. I didn't know how big this was. Um, it's also a cool thing too. Have any of you guys ever heard of Kali Linux?
Mhm.
So I used Kali when I was in college for a cybersecurity course. And Kali is actually really cool because it's designed for a lot of practice. So Kali Linux is kind of more on the security side. It comes with a lot of built-in tools. And then you can actually use this to have an application and practice hacking it on your own. And this is actually called ethical hacking. And there are actually people employed that do this. So ethical hacking essentially is you're hiring someone to hack your application so you know where the vulnerabilities are at. This is kind of what DAST scanning does, but these people kind of go a little bit more depth into your application and use those skills to hack your application so you can fix those. And that when I found that out, I thought that was like the coolest thing in the world. um,
Yeah.
I know some people, at least I've heard some stories where, you know, we had someone who hacked the government on like the super secure application, and then he actually got hired on to do ethical hacking for their application later. So it's kind of like really wild. We talked about white box and black box, but you know, someone who does a mix of this in both, uh, you know, they do sometimes good with white box, they do sometimes bad with black box hacking. That's called gray box. It's just kind of a mix of the two. So I had a lot of fun when I was using this. There's a lot of websites and resources that you can use to practice these. So, for example, you can practice SQL injection. So you have like tutorial and examples. You have a lot of practices to avoid in it. Cheat sheets. Kali is a really good way to practice though. But one thing I also found is Sync also has a game for it. It's called Vortex. So it'll take you through vulnerabilities. And then it's just kind of like you hit a vulnerability and then you open it, and then it'll tell you which ones it is. So this is like RC, and then you just go through here, and then it brings up sync is also a really good way place to look at vulnerabilities as well. So a really good way to practice on how these can impact your applications is just to try them. And please don't go to your place of work and try to hack their application internally. Please use like a game like this, or something made for the process of learning. Don't get fired, please. Um, but yeah, there's so many different types of vulnerabilities. It's actually really cool to kind of see like how all of these are created. But I can tell you that some of them are really annoying. So you have a lot of packages, for example, Spring and Tomcat, that are a lot more vulnerable because those are bigger applications. They're used to communicate across services. So they therefore are a bigger target for a lot of people. And usually I will resolve one vulnerability and then another one opens up the next month. So I'm like, darn it. Um, I think that's pretty much all I had for you guys though. Do we have any questions? Come on, Max, what's your question?
Yeah. I had just kind of like a follow-up question on that. Does Humana do any black box testing?
I don't know, and I'm
Meaning
not sure
like,
that I could answer that even if I did.
oh, okay. I was just curious.
I'm just a lowly developer.
Like, I don't know if you've ever like if something has ever come up where they found like a piece of code that you wrote or something that where something was found in it.
Oh, yeah, no, they definitely they definitely do let you know if there's something in there.
Yeah.
I will tell you that. And you have a specific number of days that you have to resolve it. And then if it's determined a certain severity, you have to get it approved by the vice president if you can't get it done in time.
Okay.
Yeah, they take their security very, very seriously, and there's a reason, right? We have a lot of clients, and it really impacts the business. So yeah. Any other questions? I was like, that really wasn't in depth. I was like, that was really a really quick walkthrough, but then I realized it's almost like 6:50. It is 6:50. And I was like, oh, that was a lot longer than I thought it was.
That was great. That was a lot of information.
Yeah, I think you threw out about a dozen different tools that you use.
I found most of them through Google search. These are
Yeah.
not the ones that I use at Humana. So with Humana, we have very specific tools because
Yeah.
I a lot of things on the internet are blocked, actually. So I can only use Humana approved resources. So
Makes
sometimes
sense.
trying to do this research is a huge pain. And it's something that does not get enough awareness even by our application teams. So I feel like even if you don't know a whole lot about it, being aware of this and some of the resources can be really helpful.